Welcome, everybody, to Club and Country today. David Goss and Bobby Warshaw with you for this show. We had a great show yesterday with Pa Moduka previewing everything in Group A, plus some general World Cup storylines that we're looking forward to. So you can go listen to that show. Just search MLS Today in any of your podcast feeds, and that's where Club and Country today will live. I, of course, am David, as I said. Alongside me is Bobby Warshaw. We've got Group B and Group C to preview here today. So a lot of content, a lot of information coming to you, including a special guest, Hugo Ramirez from down in Mexico, 2DNA reporter who will give us sort of the vibe check on Mexico coming out of their group, their roster announcement yesterday, as well as, of course, they are part of Group C, who will be previewing later today. But before, Bobby, we get into the group previews, this, of course, a daily show. All World Cup will be live on Sunday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time to react to the opener, 5 p.m. every single day after that through the first 3 rounds. We're going to be news heavy, reacting to news, talking about what's going on. These shows a little different, but today we had to start with some big news. So Cristiano Ronaldo, from the outside at least, some awkward interactions with his Portuguese teammates off the back of his comments, pretty much tearing down Manchester United in a sit-down interview with Piers Morgan. Bobby, this is interesting for the Portuguese national team.
Yeah, David, when we think about this Portuguese team, one of their competitive advantages has always been that they felt like a very unified group, that they always got more than the sum of their parts because they like each other, because they get along, because they work well together. But now this puts us into flux, and we don't know the full story. All that we can see are the videos coming out of camp of the frosty reception that Ronaldo has gotten from his teammates. But trust is so important inside a locker room, inside a team environment. And if that trust has been partially broken, I mean, the betting markets have Portugal as one of the 9 favorites coming in. It wouldn't surprise anyone if they lifted the World Cup trophy at the end. But if you're now a group that doesn't have the same unity, especially when that's always been your advantage, it's the storyline we need to keep an eye on throughout the tournament.
And it's not just a player. It's Cristiano Ronaldo in Portugal. He's the greatest player in the nation's history. He is the hero to many of the players on this team right now. He is the face of the sport and the face of this team. So it's not just simple where, this is the backup left back, we'll move on. And I would like to say we will be doing Portugal tomorrow, I believe. They should not be a team that's better than the sum of their parts. This is an elite golden generation of talent globally, and Fernando Santos is holding a lot of that back. But that's not for today. Today is Group B and Group C.
David, you know there's some things I don't stand for, and disrespect for the backup left back is one of those.
Yeah, that's
so let's just get that down early on in these shows.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But backup left backs can be very crucial in set pieces, which is something you love. And we will get to that as we go along. We start today with Group B. We've got England, of course, headlining this group. There are UK rivals in Wales alongside them in Group B. Of course, the United States as well, who has, a little bit of rivalry with England, if you are still frosty about 1776 or not. And then the top team out of Asian qualifying in Iran. Those are the 4 squads that we're going to talk about here in Group B.
Yeah, and David, to look at the MGM betting market, just to get a sense of where these teams stand, because it tends to be an efficient projection of how the rankings will end. England is the clear favorite, 96% odds, pretty similar to what we see from the Pot A teams in most groups. And then right now, MGM has the U.S. as the second place team with a 50% chance of going through. Wales at 45%, and then Iran at 27%, which is higher than we talked about for Qatar yesterday, and is higher than we will talk about with Saudi Arabia coming up in Group C. So as the Pot D team, Iran with a higher projection than we will often see from the groups.
Let's start digging into these teams, Bobby. Let's start with the 3 Lions up top. The England national team, how they got here. They won Group I in UEFA qualifying on 26 points ahead of Poland, Albania, Hungary, Andorra, and San Marino, which was less difficult for them. They won their first 6 games in a row in qualifying until a 1-1 draw at Poland. They then drew at home against Hungary as well. Those were their 2 sort of results in this, but it was very clean qualifying for them. The last time we saw England on a big stage, of course, was last year in the European finals in Wembley. They lost in penalties to Italy, and at 2018 World Cup, it was a high point for England. Semifinal appearance, they lost to Croatia, losing the 3rd place game to Belgium under Southgate. My fact on this country is one that I sort of made up myself, but it's true. This is only the second time in World Cup history that God Save the King will be sung as a national anthem at a World Cup game. Queen Elizabeth II ruling for over 70 years as queen. So 1950 was the first time it was sung because England, of course, invented the sport. They didn't have to play in the first two World Cups. Why would they sully themselves? Then you had World War II. So the first World Cup that England played in, 1950, where they lost to the U.S. 1-0. They sang God Save the Queen, God Save the King. Queen Elizabeth II took over in 1952 and has been the leader of that country on the monarchy side until this year in the World Cup. That's the fact I came up with, Bobby. That's the most I care about with England.
I did not take you as a QE2 kind of guy. I personally will take all the 2EQ facts I can get, but I didn't think you'd bring them this morning.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the monarchy, but it just felt like something to throw in there. The overview on this team, Bobby, is this could be it for Southgate. He could either win it all and finally get over the line where he's been so close, a semifinal in the World Cup, a final in the European Championships, or he could be out the door in 2 weeks if England crashes out. Injuries, lack of form for a lot of players means this tournament isn't coming at the perfect time, something we saw reflected in his roster, which was a little bit surprising to a lot of people. But as I just mentioned, this is a team that turns it on in these types of competitions. They are built, they are ready for tournament knockout play. When you look at key players for this team, you start with Harry Kane, the captain, the legend, the number 10, I believe is what he's going to wear, but the number 9. In reality, he is 2 goals behind Wayne Rooney for a tie as the all-time leader in English national team goals. That's how good he's been in his England career. Just saw him with Prince William, more royalty in there, shaking hands and taking pictures. The other star of this team, Bobby, is your set pieces. This is the set piece squad. They scored 9 of their 12 goals in the 2018 World Cup off set pieces. They produced more shots and chances off set pieces than any other team in UEFA, both in World Cup qualifying and in the 2020 European Championships.
Yeah, David, and it's hard because England are already stacked with talent. They are already one of the favorites coming into this tournament. So if you're an underdog playing against them, you would usually say, all right, at least we have set pieces. If we're better than them on corner kicks, on free kicks, then we have a chance. But against this England team, that's not quite as true. The second part of this is that set pieces will also impact Gareth Southgate's roster selection. With the big name there, I think, coming at center back with Harry Maguire. Does Harry Maguire deserve to start on merit for his play with Manchester United over the last few months? Probably not. Do we want Harry Maguire on the field if your competitive advantage is going to be on set pieces? Absolutely. So keep an eye on how these set pieces will impact the decisions for the starting 11 throughout the tournament.
The other thing that stands out about this team is often when you see teams that are great at set pieces, it's either someone who can shoot or they're good on service. This team has both. You mentioned Harry Maguire. Kieran Trippier obviously scoring in the World Cup semifinals, one of the best free kick takers. Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. So this England team can hurt you in both ways on set pieces, Bobby, which makes them unique.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the lineup part as well, David, because it's a group that definitely has the talent, but it feels like it's the team in this tournament with the biggest question about how the puzzle pieces fit together. So when you look at it and you have to think about what their expectations are, do you think that ultimately Gareth Southgate can figure out the right mix of 11 players to make a run through the group stage and then the knockout rounds?
It feels like the answer is there's so much talent that he can't get it wrong. Because if you say, oh, this guy Raheem Sterling deserves to start, but he doesn't give him the chance. Now you're
then
talking
you
about
just put it. Yeah, then it's just Phil Foden.
Jack Grealish. Are you talking about Bukayo Saka at left back or left wing back in place of Luke Shaw? It feels like there's too much talent. Now, that's also the story of this sport, right? You only get 11 players. There's only one ball. Depth matters, but only to an extent because only so many people can affect the game. And we've seen upsets in this sport. So on the one hand, I say I don't really care and it doesn't really matter. And on the other hand, I think there is a chance it could tank this team because you talked about it. If players are on this squad saying, well, I've worked hard. Why is Harry Maguire starting over me? Why is why is James Maddison, although he probably deserves a spot starting over me when I've worked so hard through qualifying and all these other things. It feels like there is the potential for that to sort of torpedo things for this squad.
You know my strong England opinion, which I wasn't going to bring up until you just teased it out of me, that Luke Shaw is actually the best and most important player on this team.
Why?
That he is actually the one at left back who is really the best combination player through the attacking third. He's actually the best player to get them that final pass for a Harry Kane, for Raheem Sterling to score. So I know that there's a lot of people who question Luke Shaw, and I am actually one of his biggest defenders. So
Defender of a defender, Bobby. That's a really good spot to be.
Luke Shaw, the key player for this English team.
Okay, there you go. So that is England. It is going to be an interesting tournament for them. It is obviously a big one for them. Bobby, let's continue to go through this group.
Okay. We will talk about US on so many other places and on MLS channels throughout the week. So we are not going to preview this US team. Instead, we're going to jump ahead to Wales, who is the third favorite in the group. And I want to start with the important trivia for Wales. And David, do you know what animal the Welsh flag has on it?
Dragon, baby. House of Dragons.
Do you know why it's a dragon?
Because that is the native home of dragons?
It might be. I think that's a good guess. That is still, I think there's research being done on that. They're double checking. It is considered the Welsh flag that the Welsh kings of Aberfraw first adopted the dragon in the early 5th century in order to symbolize their power and authority after the Romans withdrew from the area. Now, more importantly, there are 3 countries in the world with a dragon on the flag. Can you name the other 2?
Gibraltar.
Gibraltar, good guess. Not right, but a good guess. They are Malta and Bhutan.
Oh, let's go Bhutan.
Yeah, 3 countries with a dragon on the flag. Wales is one of them.
I like that.
Moving on to how they got here. They finished second in their UEFA qualifying group behind Belgium, and then they qualified for the playoff stage. They had to win 2 different rounds. The first, they defeated Austria, and the second, they defeated Ukraine. And David, when I think about the one big thing to know about this Welsh team, it's that this is probably the pinnacle for them as a male footballing country. This is probably as good as it gets. Then the men's team had not qualified for a World Cup since 1958. They had not qualified for a Euro since 1960. And then this group of players, led by really 2 bona fide Champions League stars in 33-year-old Gareth Bale, currently of LAFC, and 31-year-old Aaron Ramsey, led the team in 2016 to the semifinals of the European Championships and have now qualified for the 2022 World Cup. But those 2 players are probably getting to the other side of the hill. So this might be the main run that this men's Welsh national team makes for potentially the next couple generations again.
It's going to be really interesting to see. 2016, obviously, that high point, as you said. What I find funny about this team, and I watched a few Wales games this week to sort of get myself back up to speed because we haven't seen these teams for a little while, is they're known as a defensive team that will score on the counter or set pieces, mainly through Gareth Bale. But when you actually watch this back 5, their wing backs push really high. They get into the attack aggressively, and their wide center backs are happy to step into space with the ball at their foot. They have a few different options in that spot. A few guys play it differently, but I kind of in my head had said, oh, I'm going to tune in and they're just going to sit all the way deep and never come out of their own half. And they don't actually do that as much as I remember.
Yeah, if you are a neutral, this is an enjoyable team to watch because they are ostensibly a defensive team that actually doesn't have a great defensive record. If we look at their qualifying record in UEFA, of all of the teams that finished second in their group, who went to the playoff, and of course, many of them qualified for this World Cup, Wales actually had the second worst defensive record. So let's say of all the teams that qualified from Europe for the World Cup, the Welsh had one of the worst defensive records, despite being a defensive team. So if you are a neutral looking for games to watch, this is going to be one of the teams that you should tune into.
Now, one of the things you won't be sure of and will obviously affect this team is you mentioned Bale and Ramsey. Joe Allen's the other key piece that has led this team over the last 7 years. They're all injury concerns or fitness concerns. Ramsey and Allen haven't played over the last few weeks, and Gareth Bale did score the winner in MLS Cup. He did not. I think he started 2 games did not play 90 minutes at all in the MLS season once he joined from Real Madrid.
I asked for one thing when we started the show, David, and it's just that I got to talk about Joe Allen.
Go for it.
I love talking Joe Allen, man. The possession-based midfielder is good on the ball, dictating the rhythm. Yes, this team has Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey and Daniel James and then Ben Davies of Spurs. But I love what Joe Allen does in the midfield. Previously of Liverpool, now back with Swansea. I just always enjoy watching him. He's a type of midfielder that's just buzzing around. He doesn't necessarily get on the ball a ton for this Welsh team, but one of my low-key favorite players in world football.
If he plays. Sorry to break your heart there, Bobby.
If he plays. We'll remain optimistic on this show about all the injury doubts.
Okay. That's fine. The other pieces, you mentioned Daniel James. To me, he's a special player just in terms of athleticism, in terms of drive. He's constantly making defenders make decisions and make their life harder. It doesn't always have the final product for him, but when you watch this team, there's sort of two teams that you can see. One is Brennan Johnson and Daniel James alongside Gareth Bale, covering ground, rotating spots, changing where they play, pressing into the corners. The other is with Kiefer Moore, where everything's a direct ball to him and it's either knockdowns to Bale or just trying to finish off crosses. There's two options there for Wales. My guess would be we'll see Kiefer Moore for the first game. He has scored the big goals for this team, and it feels like Rob Page is more comfortable with that style of soccer. All right, Bobby.
I have nothing to add on the Welsh attack. I think there's things we can talk about, but the truth is it's definitively a team that's driven forward by their mega stars. And the main storyline is always in sports. It's fun to watch a team that has a singular player or two with their legacy in the country on their shoulders. And that isn't the main part of this Welsh team.
And bucket hats. Their fans like to wear bucket hats. They're bringing it back into style. That feels like a good move for you. You feel like a bucket hat guy.
I am absolutely a bucket hat guy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty good. The farther Wales goes, the more time and years into the future, you can coolly wear a bucket hat.
I feel seen right now, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
I got you. All right, let's continue on in Group B. As you mentioned, we'll do the U.S. for a few moments at the end. Go listen to Extra Time. They had a full reaction show, an hour plus to the roster last week. We talked about Ricardo Pepi and pieces in there as well on Monday. This show will be your reaction show to USA games live as they happen, but we wanted to give some time to some other teams. So now we're going to move on to Iran. We're going to talk about them here as a sporting entity. Right now, we know there's a ton going on in Iran outside of sports. We encourage everyone to go out, read, educate, and speak up about those issues. But on the soccer side, we look at an Iran team that went 8-1-1 to top Group A in the final round of qualifying in Asia. 15 goals for, only 4 goals against. They went 8-0-0 in the previous round, including beating Cambodia a combined 24-0 over the course of the 2 games they played against them. The last time we saw them on a big stage, 2019 Asian Cup, they lost in the semifinals pretty handily to Japan 3-0. They beat China and Oman to get there after topping a group against Iraq. And in the 2018 World Cup, they beat Morocco in the opening game. They drew Portugal and then lost to Spain. They have never made it out of their group at a full senior men's World Cup. There is a ton of carryover from that team. There could be 6 to 7 starters that were on the field throughout that World Cup run in 2018. There are 15 players on the roster who are part of that 2018 side. So if you asked me to write the overview of what this team's chances were when the draw happened, it would be a lot different than what it is right now. You've got the protests across the country following the death of Mahsa Amini. It's changed so much culturally in Iran. It has also affected this team. You have players posting in support of the protests on social media as well as against the protests. You have athletes, including players on this team, Melly, this week that have protested during the anthem before sporting events. And there are rumors that the government tried to influence the team selection under Carlos Queiroz, who himself came in chaotic fashion less than 2 months ago, causing a mess on the soccer side. He did coach this team for 8 years going into 2019, but he just rejoined on September 27th. Though the silver lining for this team, though, Bobby, in a tournament like this, is they know exactly who they are. They press, they defend in a mid block. They know what they want to do in possession when they have it, and they're effective with it. And they have experience now coming off the 2014 and 2018 World Cups. Their star up top is Taremi, playing at Porto right now, almost a level no Iranian player has ever hit before. They do have Sardar Azmoun as well, a star striker behind him. And then you've got Saeed Estouali playing in Denmark right now. He's the D-mid that holds everything together, that keeps everything moving, and he's the one who's going to launch those counterattacks quickly out of their side. Bobby, this was the best team in Asia for a reason in World Cup qualifying. It feels like they were ready to take that next step at the World Cup level.
Yeah, if you look at the data on past World Cups, being a solid defensive team can get you so far. And that is clearly what Iran brings into this. And then you add on to the fact that their three most talented players are really the three attackers. So they're organized defensively. They're solid in their shape and their tactics. And then they also have the talent up top to cause you trouble. When you think about a recipe that works well in a World Cup tournament, it feels like that's what Iran is bringing into this.
You mentioned the three attackers. So you've got John Bosch as well, who will playing at Feyenoord right now, who will play out on one of the wings, and then Goli Zedea, who's playing in Belgium as well. There's a ton of experience playing around the world in this team. There's also a lot of continuity because everyone who plays in Iran plays on one of two teams, Estegal or Persepolis. And so they all know each other very well, which, Bobby, we've seen work well in World Cups for teams. You also have the Queiroz part of this. He's a larger than life figure in the sport in Iran because of the performances the teams had. There's stories that fans went out and celebrated after the 1-0 loss to Argentina in 2014 because the performance was so good, finally returning to a World Cup after 8 years. He has all of that going for him. At the same time, as I said, he hasn't worked with this team outside of 2 games in the last 3 years.
It's funny because you do research for preparing for this show. And I had known that Carlos Queiroz was no longer head coach of Iran during qualifying. And then you read up on it and you're like, of course he's back. Of course this is a thing. And for people that aren't familiar, he was at one point an assistant for Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. He was at one point the head coach of the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars. But really for the last 10 years has been with this Iranian national team in Egypt and a couple other national teams. But David, it was just one of those things where you're just like, of course this is happening right now.
He coached Egypt through qualifying, failed in the playoff against Senegal, who we talked about yesterday, and then his contract ended and he got signed as the coach of Iran to go to the World Cup. As you said, it wasn't a question of if he'd be at the World Cup. It was just a question of who he'd be with. And that is a unique spot that he sits in. This Iran team, Bobby, when you look at them matchup-wise, England, Wales, and the U.S., sort of what's your takeaway of what they'll be in the group?
I mean, it's really what I just said, that whenever you're a team that's organized defensively, that works well in a mid or a deep block, but then you also have the attacking talent to hurt you in transition or hurt you in singular moments, it's always a concern. Do they have the talent that can match up with England or the US? No. But over a single game, when those are your advantages and those are how you can harm a team, if you are Iran, you're going to feel good going into those. And David, when you've heard, and I appreciate podcasts like Scuffed or Total Soccer Show who have talked to analysts from other countries, the fact that truly every single team, of course England, but also Wales and fans and analysts in Iran talk about this group, they all fully believe that they will be the team to make it to the next round. And there is a very solid, honest case for each of them to do so.
So we mentioned we're not going to dig in deep on the U.S., but when you look at this group, Bobby, based off the odds you gave us, it feels like the biggest game is at 2 p.m. Eastern time coming up next Monday, November 21st on Fox and Telemundo here in the U.S. against Wales. That feels like the decider of who will be going through alongside England.
Yes, if you win that first game, we all know the data for how often you go through if you win the first game, but also the momentum, but also the lineup flexibility you have to not have to rush out your top players in each and every game and to think about the matchups and think about who's fresh. I think you're right, David, that first game between US and Wales is going to set the tone for what needs to happen throughout the rest of the group games.
It is going to be a fascinating group. And one of the big storylines for everyone in the US, of course, is, yeah, that's a big game. But the next game is Black Friday, US against England, that one as well, 2 p.m. Eastern time on Fox, on Telemundo. We will have a watch-along show at MLSsoccer.com with all of those games. Some big guests that will be coming in alongside, I believe, Andrew Wiebe and Kalen Carr and Charlie Davies. I think some big names that used to be in World Cups with the U.S. and have been around World Cups with the U.S. We will also have watch-along shows alongside the Canada games. We'll have Pa Modoka back on for one of those, as well as some other big guests. And then this show will be your reaction. So we'll be on live 5 p.m. Eastern time after those games end at 4. We could be celebratory. We could be somber. Whatever it is, we're going to give you the vibe. We're going to have you come along. You decide our conversation. So make sure to jump in and be a part of that with us. And we will be on live every single day throughout the World Cup, which is going to be a lot of fun and very special. So that's Group B for you on Friday. I'm going to make Bobby do some previews. We're going to talk about who we think is going to go through and why, but he refuses to do that right now. So let's move on to Group C. And Bobby, why don't you start us off with the heavyweights with Argentina?
David, are you a predictions guy?
No, but I love a bracket.
Do you give me the pitch for why I should love a bracket?
I just love the simplicity of when people talk in abstract, it's like, well, Brazil's going to win. Argentina's going to win. Portugal's going to win. It's like, well, you just named 3 winners. And those 2 teams are going to match up in a quarterfinal or a semifinal. I like the simplicity of actually seeing how it could happen and how it does lay out to sort of affect the way that you preview it and predict it. I also love because normally about 1/19 of the way through a competition, my brackets are perfect and I'm like all about it. And then the next set of games happen and my bracket, my champion loses in the first round and then I forget about it.
Isn't it more fun to enter with an emotional clean slate, though? Because say you do pick Portugal to beat Spain, and then Spain scores a 94th minute winner, an incredible goal, and you're a little bit annoyed about that gorgeous goal because it hurt your bracket.
That's one way to say it. The other is I already have too much emotional scar tissue with too many of these teams and countries, so it doesn't matter. I'm not neutral on any of this.
I think that's a good way to describe yourself as a big emotional scar tissue guy.
Especially when it comes to countries and national teams. Trust me when I tell you, I rewatched some of the 06 World Cup and I still can't believe Italy got that penalty against Australia. And I'm not even Australian. So that's how strongly I feel about all of this.
And moving on to Group C.
Yeah, you're on Argentina, Bobby.
Okay, let's first talk about the overall context of the group.
Good call. I will give you all the teams in the group. Good call. You've got Argentina, who come in as Copa America champions. I completely forgot that was a thing we did. You've got Mexico, of course, coming out of CONCACAF. We will have Hugo Ramirez on in a couple of moments to help us break down things. For Mexico, you've got Saudi Arabia coming out of Asian World Cup qualifying, bordering Qatar. So it's going to be the shortest trip for them to get to this tournament for their fan base, as well as their players who are all, I think, based in Saudi Arabia professionally. And then you've got Poland closing out this group in what we expect to be Robert Lewandowski's final World Cup as a professional.
Great job. You were a little late on that one, but
yeah,
I think you really nailed it in the end. Okay, so just to give a little bit of the analytical view to this, Argentina, like other favorites, is over 90%, about 94% projection that they make it through. Despite the turmoil around the Mexican national team, at least some of the betting markets think that they are the favorite to get that second place nod and make it to the knockout round. They're at 53%, just slightly ahead of Poland at 52%, with Saudi Arabia at 13%. Again, Saudi Arabia is lower than the Pot D teams we've talked about before in Qatar and Iran.
All right, Bobby, take us in for Argentina.
Okay. The important trivia here, and this one goes out to our wonderful producer, Galina, who is a trained dancer throughout her life, is that Argentina is the birthplace to tango. And tango originated in Argentina sometime in the 19th century, and it started in the lower class neighborhoods of the country, and shocker, was not entirely accepted by the upper class within the nation until the mid-1900s, mostly because in the 1910s, it became very popular in the major European cities, which actually made it more mainstream back in Argentina. Tango fun facts. That's what you come to Club and Country today for. Yeah, thank you.
Did you say the improv thing?
And it is the only duo dance.
First.
It is the first duo.
It's the first couples dance that allowed improv in the dance style.
Nobody in my life is surprised that I messed up the dancing fun fact. Okay, moving on to Argentina. They got here by finishing second in South American qualifying after Brazil, but they are also on a 34 game unbeaten streak overall. If they actually go unbeaten through the group stage, they will set the record for the longest unbeaten streak in international team history. The caveat there is that the team that they will surpass is who, David?
Italy.
From 2018 to 2021, which also encompasses their World Cup qualifying, in which they did not actually make it through to the World Cup. So not always a wonderful omen to set this record, but still a generally impressive run for the national team. And the one main thing to know and understand, and I dislike simplifying stories and bringing the same one over and over, but David, I don't know how we talk about this Argentina team. I don't know how we talk about the World Cup as a whole without talking about the impact it has on Leo Messi's legacy. Because I'll caveat by saying for me, but I think that it's not for you and everyone else that Leo Messi is the greatest player we've ever seen. And I don't know how to compare players between generations, but at least the one we've ever seen, then that is just not an honest assessment. It's certainly not a fair and definitely not an accurate assessment. And the only thing that keeps 100% of people from saying he is the greatest player we have ever seen with our own eyes is the fact that he has not won more major international tournaments. He finally won his first Copa America last year. And if he wins this World Cup, I think it will rightfully proclaim him the greatest player that a person, has seen live in our generation.
How much do you think the Copa America win took the pressure off, though? Did it shift anything?
Only slightly, but no, not in a material way. That this World Cup is important. And you and I both hate rings culture. You and I both hate that a player's legacy and a player's memory comes down to what they do in singular, really chance-based events. But it's a fact. And for that reason, I hope that Argentina, if Argentina wins this, I will be happy because at least it creates some honesty and some integrity to what I actually find to be a fun and interesting conversation that Leo Messi truly is the greatest player of the generation.
And on the rings culture side, you could argue in debate, and I don't know that a lot of people will call Argentina an underdog, but the fact that they didn't win because his teammates were incapable of finishing in those big moments almost shows how good he had to play to get to those finals. 2014 World Cup final, 2015, 16 Copa Americas. There's like two sides, I think, to that argument. And I wouldn't say he carried the team. There are elite players in this group, and there are obviously always going to be elite players. But Bobby, when I look at this Argentina side, the thing that stands out to me is balance that hasn't existed in Messi's time. Now, 2018 with Sampaoli, train wreck. Anytime Maradona was coaching this team, it was a bit of a mess. But even at their peak in 2014, it felt like this was a team that was so reliant on Messi and Messi alone that there was not other ideas if Di Maria didn't have a moment of brilliance. Now this feels like a team that's defensively solid and has other ways to attack.
Yeah, it's funny because as important as Leo Messi is to this team, that he can also be the detriment at times. And David, I find it amazing when you watch these elite players, like generationally great players, and they still effectively just try and pass the ball off to Messi whenever they can and totally adjust their game just to get him the ball, generally to the detriment of how they perform. So the key piece for this team is how well do they fit as a unit, in which case Messi is the final complementary piece opposed to the do everything guy, because they certainly do have the other players who deserve to win World Cups as well.
Can I give you a wild stat and then we can get ready to go to Mexico and talk to Hugo?
I live for wild stats.
19 of the players on this roster are going to make their World Cup debut. So for a country that always qualifies, it feels like they finally have flipped the page on Higuain and Di Maria and Messi's generation. Now Di Maria, Messi, and your guy, Nicolas Otamendi, are still in this team, but it is a younger team. It is a team with a lot of talent. And then it's a team that, and Argentina, I think, does this sort of like no other country. You've got guys like Papu Gomez, who were never part of the team and now are in the late stages of their career when they've shown themselves at the club level.
Yeah. And then the last thing I do want to say about those other players before we do transition is I want to talk about Lautaro Martinez, the team's center forward. Because if you look at World Cups as a whole, and the Athletics' Michael Cox did a nice piece on what are some of the data points that you want to see from a team for them to really contend. And one of the clear data points is you actually don't need a center forward who is a prolific goal scorer. You need someone who can score goals, but it doesn't need to be your center forward. You would think, oh, okay, that's great for Argentina because they do have such talent behind him and Angel Di Maria and certainly Messi. But if you look at Messi as a player now and his data profile, he is much more of a passer and a distributor and a through ball provider than he is a pure goal scorer. So it is likely that Argentina will need someone to poach in the box to get on the end of Messi and Di Maria's work. And Lautaro Martinez certainly is that player. So as you watch the World Cup as a whole, so number 9 scoring goals is not super important for a team to win, but I would make a bet that it is more important for this Argentina team that Lautaro Martinez does score and finish off the team's chances.
I want to say when I read that, I thought that was choosing that as reasoning, where in reality it was you look at all those teams and they just had overwhelming talent without having great center forwards, right? The story around Germany in 2014 and France left Karim Benzema off the roster, and Mbappe and Pogba and Conte led them. I don't believe that stat means teams that win don't have great center forwards. It just meant that's the reality of what's happened.
Oh, you're just teeing me up for one of my strong beliefs is that we overvalue the importance of skill at the number 9 when really number 9 should be the most functional position on the field. We don't often see it because people love skill, they love talent, they love goal scorers. But for me, the number 9 should be about functionality and bringing out the best of the rest of the attackers because that's really the player that can do that the most. So
like a creator out of there, like a Romelu Lukaku who sets up like a Lautaro Martinez and Kevin De Bruyne, a guy like that.
Okay.
We'll get to Belgium tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. That's the story on Argentina. Let's move to Mexico now. We've got Hugo Ramirez with us, coming from down in Mexico to chat with us. Hugo, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. The Mexico roster coming out yesterday. Obviously, exciting time going into the World Cup. Let's start big picture here. Give us a sense of the feel, the vibe around the country, around the team right now, what people think about El Tri.
Well, Mexico, as you know, and all the media from the sports nation, it's a little chaotic, a little catastrophic. It goes with the moment. And yesterday it was a big day, and it was a hard day for Gerardo Tata Martino, the head coach of the Mexican national team, after he unveiled his 26 players that are going to represent El Tri in Qatar 2022. Especially a lot of like doubts, especially in the forwards, because we know Raúl Jiménez has an injury, and we know Raúl Jiménez is not a 100% fit from the injury he has, a muscular injury, pubalgia, that is known from Mexico. He has to have surgery sooner than later, and he is trying all his best to be at the World Cup. We know he's not gonna be on the lineup to start a game. He's gonna be a sub, and after you know that a present like forward like Santi Jimenez, that is in Feyenoord, that is having minutes, that it's the best forward right now with 4 goals in the UEFA Europa League. That's one doubt that was brought, that is going to be brought, because Tata Martinez is going to have a press conference today, and they're going to talk about that. Previously, they're going to play versus Sweden tomorrow, and they're going to talk about that. That is the first doubt that all the Mexican media in the sports nation talks about. It should be Santi Jimenez instead of Raúl Jiménez, or even Rogelio Funes Mori, that even though he is the best forward in the history of Rayados, in the history of Monterrey, a club in the Liga MX, with the Mexican national team, he doesn't apply for all the standards and for all the credit that he does in the club, in the Mexican national team. He does not show the correct level of play if you know, he should. And this, David, I think Gerardo Tata Martino demonstrates us, like every human being, that he's a human, because he's letting like personal emotions, all the chemistry he has, personal chemistry he has with Raúl Jiménez, with Rogelio Funes Mori, instead of the actual level of play that a forward like Santi Jiménez has, with 21 years old. And well, that is the first doubt we have. I don't know what you think about this, but yes, Santi Jiménez, many of us say, should have been in the final roster of the Mexican national team.
Hugo, you've talked about the attacking options, but two names that you have not said are Carlos Vela and Chicharito. For someone that's just now tuning into this Mexican national team ahead of the World Cup, why are those two big names that probably still have the ability to help the group, not included on this World Cup roster?
Yes, first, Carlos Vela. Carlos Vela, it's and you know him a lot with all the play he has in LAFC the last 4 seasons. Carlos Vela, it's a human that since the World Cup of 2018, when it finished in Russia, he said, it's enough. Me and the history with the Mexican national team. I don't want to play no more. It's time for other generations to step up. Tata Martino searched Carlos Vela in about a month ago, like the last plead, if you want to call it like that. And Carlos Vela said, "No, thank you very much. I'm fine with my decision, with my resolution, and I don't want to play with the Mexican national team." The case of Chicharito, it's very different. In September 2019, he was brought in case of indiscipline actions during a fecha FIFA, during a play with the Mexican national team, and that brought a great disgust with Gerardo Tata Martino, because a staff member of the Mexican national team cost his job, and Chicharito didn't apologize for his actions, and that brought a lot of irregularity within the group. And Gerardo Tata Martino decided that if Chicharito didn't apologize for that, he will not return to the Mexican national team. It's like a case of pride versus pride, if you want to call it like that, between the head coach and the forward, and neither of the two well, they both stood firm, and neither of the two brought their actions to a resolution for the Mexican national team, because the president of Chicharito, of course, it invited to be the forward to be in the Mexican national team because of the Raúl Jiménez injury and stuff like that. But it was a case like pride versus pride. You can call it like that. And Gerardo Tata Martino said, with me at the helm, the Chicharito, if he doesn't apologize, he will not be back to the Mexican national team.
Let's talk Tata. He was brought in to get to the fifth game. The story for Mexico has always been every World Cup they get out of the group stage. Every World Cup they get to the round of 16. They've never gotten past that point. That was the purpose of bringing a global manager like Tata, who managed in Barca and Argentina and helped Paraguay, and of course then won an MLS Cup with Atlanta, to this team. You mentioned him a lot, his pride, his relationship. Where does he stand right now, and sort of what is the reaction to the culture he's built in this team, and fans sort of feeling, what's their feeling around him?
You know, David, this is the first time since the World Cup of 1998 that in the surrounding of the Mexican national team, all the media, they say that Mexico is not gonna advance to the round of 16. This is the first time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negativity around the Mexican national team and around Gerardo Tata Martino. The relationship between all the all the fanatics, all the media, and Tata Martino, it's completely broken. Tata Martino, all we know from Tata Martino is when the World Cup finishes, he's gonna grab his stuff. He's gonna fly to Argentina, and thank you very much, because when he was hired in 2019, in January of 2019, they called Tata Martino to a process of 2 World Cups, thinking of the 2026 World Cup with Mexico, United States, and Canada being the home of the next World Cup. And right now, that is without a doubt out of question. And right now, Tata Martino is facing a lot of pressure. Tata Martino, I think his big motivation that it could help Mexico fanatics and all of that, it's to silence all the critics. Because if Tata Martino can silence all the critics and get to the quinto partido, to the fifth game, that Mexico hasn't gone to the fifth game without being home of the World Cup, the last time 1986. All the critics, all the tension, it will dissolve in a matter of seconds. In a matter of seconds. But right now, the way the Mexican national team is playing, it doesn't invite us to think very positively. Versus Iraq, we know they won 4-0, but it was Iraq. Tomorrow versus Sweden, I think it's gonna be a better test. But undoubtedly, Tata Martino and the relationship with all the Mexican media, Mexican fanatics, it's completely broken. And what surprises me is what I started saying at the beginning, is the first time since 1998 that I hear that Mexico is not gonna advance to the round of 16.
It is an interesting time for Mexico. It's a fascinating time. They're going to get kicked off, as we said, next week on Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time against Poland, the big one, the delicious one, though. That one comes up Saturday, November 26th, 2 p.m. Eastern time against Argentina. Mexico, of course, playing Argentina in the 2006 World Cup, getting knocked out, as well as the 2010 World Cup. Tata Martino's Argentine, Funes Mori's. There is so much rivalry between these two countries. It's going to be so much fun to watch. Hugo, thank you for taking the time to join us. We'll have you back, of course, as the World Cup goes along.
Yes, thank you, David. The last thing about Tata Martino is when he when he was hired, he talked about the young talent of Mexico, and he said that Mexico has to think about the future. We know about the US MNT and all the youth it has on the roster. Mexico, I think it's the second highest experience of age roster of the World Cup. That it's something absurd. That is something like it's a lot of like contradictory things from the speech that Gerardo Tata Martino had at the beginning, and right now it feels like he's not following his beliefs, and he's going right now with all his personal chemistry with all the players that are very old of age and have not the great level of a lot of young players. So you add that to all the things that I said to you about Tata Martino, and it's not looking good for Mexico right now. Let's see when the World Cup starts, and maybe we change the narrative.
Thank you, Hugo. Appreciate the time. We will have Hugo back as we go along this World Cup. As I said, Mexico is going to be one of the teams we're going to be heavily focused on.
And David, I do just want to bring this up again because we just heard it. And certainly if you follow world football or soccer here in North America, you feel the angst coming around this Mexican national team. But I do want to point out that it's important to ground this in some type of foundation. And most of the markets around the world, whether it's MGM here in the US or maybe a Pinnacle in Europe, still think that Mexico is either a favorite to qualify out of the group ahead of Poland are basically neck and neck with Poland. So, yes, there's a lot of anxiety about this team, but from a more objective standpoint, they should still be expected to make it out of this Group C.
All right, there you go. It is going to be really interesting. As Hugo said, this is an all-time low confidence in this team. And with the age, it's not a for the future like with the U.S., I think, where if they perform poorly, you could say, yeah, a lot of this was to build towards 2026. Canada maybe as well. Mexico's not in that same spot. Guardado and Ache could start a game next to each other. That's sort of, a retirement game at that point. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Mexico does. Let's talk about Poland now. Bobby, they are the big team that Mexico is going up against to try and get out of the group. This is a stressful, pressure-filled tournament as well for Poland. They got out of UEFA Group I behind England, who we talked about with Group B. They went 7-2-2 with 32 goals scored in qualifying, 11 goals against. They then won in their playoff against Sweden 2-0 after getting a bye through the first round of the playoffs because they were lined up to play Russia, who was withdrawn from World Cup qualifying after their invasion of Ukraine. Let me give you your fact about Poland. And this is very me, but I had to do it. 1610 in Krakow, Poland is the oldest written reference that we have in the world to the bagel. Whether Poland invented the bagel or not, we can't say. But it is the oldest reference we have to the bagel in the world.
Hey, if I might just, David, that's well done. That is well done.
It was on a city ordinance as something to be gifted to women in their pregnancy. Everyone likes bagels, so I guess that makes sense. The last time we saw this team, obviously, was in Euros. They finished last in Group E behind Sweden, Spain, and Slovakia. In 2018 World Cup, they finished last in their group as well. They beat Japan 1-0 in the final game, which ended up eliminating Senegal because of the yellow cards and all of that stuff. What I go back to is their game against Colombia, where James Rodriguez played a 90-yard through ball to Cuadrado. I still think that was one of the best games of the World Cup. This team has not gotten out of the group since 1986, which was their golden generation of Boniek and all the other players that were playing at Juventus. And of course, when you talk about this team, you are asking the question, is the pieces good enough around Robert Lewandowski to get them through the group stage? He is elite. 2 goals in 6 games under their new manager in Michniewicz. 16 goals in his first 17 appearances for Barcelona this season. So he's in great form. He has a ton of potential. And then Wojciech Szczesny is the other big name that comes to mind. He is, of course, big-time goalkeeper for this team, a team that will probably sit a little deeper through many of these games, and he'll have to deal with a lot in front of him.
You mentioned their main player is Robert Lewandowski. David, who has more World Cup goals, Harry Kane or Lewandowski?
Harry Kane.
Harry Kane does. That is because Lewandowski has actually not scored in a World Cup. He has the third most goals for men's international play of all time, but he has yet to score in a World Cup. And my other takeaway from this team, too, in terms of how he will score goals, is they are the most cross-heavy team that we will likely see. They had the most chances created from crosses in UEFA qualifying. So if Lewandowski is going to get that first World Cup goal, it will likely come from service from a wide area.
Yeah, they led Europe in goals from crosses. In 6 of the 7 games under their new manager, they have had less possession than their opponent. So as you said, this is a team that's going to build through their wingbacks, Matty Cash, who's English, Polish, who has just finally gotten his Polish citizenship lined up so that he'll make his second appearance for Poland to start this World Cup. And then Nikola Zalewski, the left wing back, who's only 20 years old, playing at Roma. The other names to know on this team, Karol Swiderski of Charlotte FC, who has actually become a huge part of this team and his ability to play as a second forward, but also be a creator. And when you look at their last window playing Wales and Belgium, but beating Wales twice off Swiderski goals, it's Swiderski's ability to just swap where Lewandowski's not. If Lua wants to drop in and create, Swiderski can be the center forward. If not, it can flip. That's the thing that Milik and Piatek haven't been able to do. Both of them can play as forwards. They're maybe even better finishers than Swiderski, but they can't drop in and help this team. And the other piece is Zielinski, who playing for Napoli right now, arguably the best club team on form in the world. It feels like the first time another player is coming in on pure form alongside Lewandowski for a major tournament for Poland.
If you didn't get a chance to bring up Zielinski, I was going to tee you up. Don't worry.
Oh, there you go. I
I
absolutely
had your
love
back.
him as a player. He's not a pure heavy volume chance creator. He's going to play sort of out on the left wing and float and find spots. But when he does, he's legit, and he can be ruthless when he wants to be. I think this, Bobby, is a team that I'm pretty excited to watch. They've let down at every major tournament since 2008 when they hosted Euros, and they've slowly grown as a nation, both on and off the field over the last 14 years. This feels like the time that they're ready to break through.
Give me a strong thesis on why I should be excited to watch this team, because I'm excited to watch a lot of teams in this tournament, and I'm not sure I would have had Poland on that list. So if I'm going to dedicate 90 minutes of my day, why should it be Poland?
Well, one, you've got Lewandowski, and if you watch the Wales game, his layoff for Swiderski, world class. Bouncing ball up at his shoulder, he lays it off with his foot through two center backs for Swiderski to finish. So if you're going to tune in and watch a player, that's the type of player you want to tune in for. But this is a team with a ton of individual creativity, a lot of players who can beat someone off the ball, who can sort of change the game out of nowhere, and that's worth tuning in for, I think, all the time. And the last one is, as I said, this is a country that's grown both on and off the field. For people that don't know, this is one of the emerging economies on the planet. They're the success story coming out of the Iron Curtain, and that's gone over to soccer. We actually know someone who went and ran some of the clinics early on to help Poland soccer build up post the fall of the USSR. This is the fruits of that labor, and so it's really interesting to watch what I think will consistently be one of the powers at the European soccer stage finally emerge on the global in a global tournament.
I love that I asked you why I should be excited about this team.
And I brought up the Iron Curtain.
Well, I was going to say you brought off a layoff.
Yeah.
And then you brought up the Iron Curtain.
It's very me. Sorry, Bobby. Let's close things out with Saudi Arabia.
Yes. Yeah. So starting at the top, about an important trivia to know about them. And Saudi Arabia is another challenging country to talk about. Anybody who wants to know more, I would highly recommend the book MBS by Ben Hubbard. It really breaks down the rise of Mohammed bin Salman, who is currently the crown prince and the leader of Saudi Arabia, to try and give one sentence, which I think really helped me contextualize where Saudi Arabia is in their history, where they stand in the world, and some of their decisions. It's that the current leader, again, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, is a 37-year-old who is the grandson of the man who founded the nation of Saudi Arabia in 1932. That was King Abdulaziz. And MBS is the son of the current king of Saudi Arabia. Remember, the crown prince is under the king and basically anointed to be the next full leader. So MBS's grandfather was the founder of the country. His father is the current king of the country. And Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, was not the obvious successor based on age or hierarchy among the brothers and the children to become the crown prince, but he got there through very savvy political maneuvering. And now he is stuck in an interesting place on where he wants to take the country socially and what he is willing to do in terms of governance and a democratic process. So again, if you are interested in Saudi Arabia and their history and their current politics, the book MBS by Ben Hubbard was a great read.
And let me just toss in here on the non-soccer side, Saudi Arabia, I mentioned off the top, bordering Qatar. There is really interesting dynamics right now over the last 5 years between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They basically led a boycott movement throughout the Middle East, supported by Egypt and some of the other big countries against Qatar. And the lone country that sort of stood with Qatar and was even closer in their relationship was Iran, which is why the expectation is nothing will happen in terms of protests or anything like that against Iran at this World Cup. It's also why we'll probably see a ton of Iranian fans in the stadiums, maybe one of the best crowds we'll see, and maybe less Saudi Arabian fans than we expected.
Okay. And how they got to the World Cup by winning their Asian qualifying group. And in that group with them was Japan and Australia. And this is one of the things that I struggle to contextualize, because we talked about how right now Saudi Arabia are projected to be one of the weakest Pot D teams and the least likely to advance through. But at the same time, we've seen that Japan team We've seen what they did to the US. We know that that's a Japan team that could effectively field 11 players from Big Five leagues. And the fact that this Saudi Arabia team finished ahead of them is an eye opener for me and really shows what they're capable of doing. And what's interesting is that they are the most evenly distributed team in this tournament. Generally, with national teams, you see a clear hierarchy. You see a star or 2 or 3 stars who can drive the team forward. This team doesn't really have that. The entire team plays in Saudi Arabia. Even the coach now lives in Saudi Arabia with them to watch them on a regular basis. They've been brought into a training camp regularly. If you're going to watch one player, it is 31-year-old midfielder Salam Al-Dawsari. But really, it's a group that doesn't have a standout player, which for me in itself is an interesting trait about a World Cup team.
You mentioned for Saudi Arabia, I would throw out 2018. They were the leading scorers in Asia going into the World Cup. That was the big storyline. Took them till the third game to even score a goal, and they were already eliminated at that point. So we have seen in the past Saudi Arabia succeed in qualifying and then struggle at the world stage. You mentioned the manager. Can we talk about Hervé Renard? I love Hervé Renard. He is one of the legends in African soccer. He won an AFCON with Zambia and then did so again with Cote d'Ivoire.
You act like there's a chance that when you get rolling on something you're excited about, I have a chance to actually ever stop you. But I appreciate that you think I can do that. And yes, to your point, he is actually the only manager to ever win the African Cup of Nations with 2 different countries. He is a very well-respected international coach. And to the point, again, he has been living in Saudi Arabia, which their national team managers don't often do. It has gained more respect from the public and from the group about what he can provide them. But yes, he will be potentially one of the reasons that they can overperform in this tournament.
So based off the odds you gave us, the conversation we had, it feels fairly safe to say next Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, November 22nd, Mexico-Poland is probably the biggest game to decide who will get out of this group.
It absolutely is. But I do want to mention this, David, because I think it's very important to talking about team dynamics. Remember that of the last 4 winners of the overall tournament, none of them have taken 9 points from the group stage. So when we talk about what the most important game is, we think who are the 2 middle teams and what happens when they play. But that's often not the case, because if we think that Argentina has a real chance to win, then we should also assume that Argentina probably will not take 9 points. There will be a game that they can struggle, which then means, okay, so can Mexico get a point off Argentina? And that gives them that advantage in that matchup. So yes, you're right. The Poland-Mexico game is the most important, but also remember that Argentina almost certainly will not take 9 points from this group.
Now, on top of that, often we see the winner struggle in the first game or take off the third game because they've already qualified. That's where I think Mexico is in a bad spot, being the second game for Argentina. Often teams that are going to win the whole thing, we see them come in with a bit of a mindset. Spain in 2010 of sort of, we're going to be here for a while. Let's come in third gear and find our feet. And you can jump on some of the better teams in the first game. Peru should have beaten France at the last World Cup in their opening game. France pretty much struggled through the entire group stage. Germany in 2014 as well. If Portugal doesn't have Pepe, they probably tie that game. And as I said with Spain, then normally that team turns it on in the second game. If they have 6 points at that stage, the third game becomes somewhat meaningless to them. That's where I think for Mexico, it's really dangerous, the way the schedule lines up for them playing Argentina in the second game. But I will say on the flip side, Mexico often rises to their opponents and falls to their opponents. And we have seen them play at least with confidence against Argentina and Brazil over the last 16 to 20 years.
Mexico beat Germany in the which game of the last World Cup? It was the first game. Okay, so they can show up and do it, but your point is that it's the second game. It actually makes it harder for them against Argentina.
That's my read from the outside and what I've seen over the last World Cups, but we will see how it plays out on this one. We hope all of you enjoyed our show. If you joined us late, if you're missing anything, search MLS Today on Spotify or any of your podcast feeds. This show will come up as a podcast there. You'll have yesterday's show in which we dug in on Group A with Pa Moduka. Of course, legendary manager, player, as well as someone who played in Qatar and the Netherlands, where we helped talk about those teams, and in West Africa as well, alongside Senegal. And we talked about some of the big storylines coming into this World Cup. Group B and C today. Tomorrow, we will continue with 2 more groups. Bobby, are you ready to keep rolling?
I'm ready to keep going. I want to say for everyone listening, we are going to keep track of running awards throughout the tournament that we are basically going to make up and decide on ahead of. So if you have awards that you want us to keep track of, let us know. Put it in the comments, put it in the replies. The one standing one we have now is the breakout star, the person that has been under the radar but will be a household name, the James from 2014 who rose to prominence, Mbappe in 2018. So please let us know who you think we should follow and what awards we should give out.
Do not say Vinicius Jr. If you do, Bobby will not allow you to continue.
You can say it if you want to be a noob.
Yeah, if you want to do that, then you can say that. All right, we'll be back tomorrow live, 11 a.m. Eastern time here on Twitter Spaces. As I said, the show on podcast. And then Sunday, we get kicked off. 11 a.m. Eastern time is the game. Qatar against Ecuador, the host opening up the World Cup. We will be with you live at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time to react to that game, as well as preview Monday, which of course is Group B and Group C action. So hit us up then. We are going to be so excited to talk throughout this World Cup. We hope you all enjoyed the show. Thank you once again to Hugo Ramirez for taking the time to join us and give us a little insight from Mexico City. Thank you, of course, to you, Bobby, to Galena for Tango Facts and explaining dancing to you, and everyone out there listening. We'll talk to you all again soon.